The scent of pine and dust hit me first. It took me a moment to realize what it was. Last year's artificial Christmas tree, leaning crookedly against a cracked mirror in the corner. I blinked against the single overhead bulb flickering in the basement storage room, my arms wrapped tight around the cardigan I'd once worn to my retirement party. It had felt like silk then. Now it felt like armor. This was my new bedroom. A twin mattress sat on the concrete floor, wedged between bins labeled Easter and Kids Art. The air was thick with mildew. No windows. No heat. Just a space heater with a tag still hanging from the cord like a promise no one intended to keep. And above me, one flight of stairs away, my daughter, her husband, and their two golden retrievers lounged in a $4,000 sectional in the home my late husband built from the ground up. I'm Margaret Ellis. I'm 71 years old, and tonight I'm sleeping in the basement. Not because I ran out of money, not because I asked for help, but because my daughter said, "It's just more convenient, Mom." The guest room is right next to Ava's nursery, and the baby hasn't been sleeping well. What she meant was, "You don't belong upstairs anymore." Before we go on, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had someone quietly push you out of the life you helped them build. Because I didn't always live like this. I didn't always shrink myself to fit beneath the floorboards. Once, I ran my own accounting firm. Once, I had my own garden. Once, my name was on the deed. But then came the stroke, and the fall, and the smile my son-in-law gave me in the rehab clinic that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We think it's best if you come live with us," he'd said, placing a hand on my daughter's shoulder. And maybe I wanted to believe that was love. Maybe I needed to, especially after losing Harold. My husband passed away 3 years ago this spring. Heart attack. Sudden, just like his father. We just celebrated 45 years together, and he was still building things, birdhouses, benches, a trellis for the roses that now wilted without him. He used to hum while he worked. That's the sound I miss the most. Humming and hammering. A man who showed love in what he made. After the funeral, Claire, our only daughter, called every day. She sent food, checked in about my meds. I was drowning in grief, and she threw me a lifeline. At least I thought that's what it was. Her husband, Brandon, was new money in an old money suit. Never liked dirt under his nails. Never looked anyone in the eye too long. He made his fortune in private tech consulting, whatever that means. Always talking about optimization, even when it came to parenting. Routine is everything, he told me once while timing Ava's diaper change on his smartwatch. Claire used to be warm. When she was little, she couldn't fall asleep without my hand on her back. She was thoughtful, creative, gentle. But somewhere along the way, after marrying Brandon, after giving up her dreams to be a stay-at-home CEO of their perfectly curated life, she hardened. The woman who used to make me lemon tea and brush my hair while we talked about art galleries now flinched when I left dishes in the sink. At first, living with them wasn't bad. I had the guest suite, a bright room overlooking the garden with my own bathroom and a tiny library nook. Ava loved to sit on my lap by the window and listen to stories. But that didn't last. 2 months ago, Brandon's parents came to stay. A week turned into a month, and suddenly my things were in boxes. Just for a little while, Claire said. They needed the guest room. For networking dinners. For potential investors. My place in the house became smaller, fuzzier, less acknowledged. They tried to make it sound like a favor. "We had the basement cleared out for you," Brandon said proudly. "It's got a lot of storage space, and you'll have privacy." What he meant was, "You're not part of the show anymore." I agreed because I was tired. Because I'd just recovered from pneumonia. Because I thought maybe it really was just temporary. That was 5 weeks ago. Tonight, I heard them laughing over dinner. I smelled filet mignon and heard clinking glasses. Ava squealed with delight over something I didn't see, and I sat on the edge of my mattress eating applesauce from a plastic cup. I used to make soufflés. I used to balance corporate budgets and review multi-million-dollar audits. Now I'm downstairs, next to the fake pine tree, my phone charging from an extension cord that snakes up the stairs into their laundry room. But here's what they don't know. The house isn't in Claire's name. Not yet. When Harold died, we set up a living trust. Quietly. Deliberately. Because Harold knew grief makes people act strangely. He saw how Brandon's eyes lit up when we mentioned transferring ownership to make things easier. He didn't trust easily. And thank God. What Brandon doesn't know is that I still control every major asset in the Ellis family portfolio. And tonight, after hearing them joke about me joining bingo night at some old folks' home, I opened the safe deposit box key I hadn't touched in years. Tomorrow, I'll make a phone call. Not to Claire. Not to Brandon. But to someone who remembers who I used to be. Someone who knows exactly what I built. This isn't just about a basement. This is about legacy. And they're about to learn the cost of underestimating Margaret Ellis. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. I didn't sleep that night, not really. The mattress pressed into my back like a reminder of everything I'd given up. I lay under a quilt Claire had made in college, back when she still believed her hands could create beauty instead of just curate someone else's life. The fabric had faded, but the stitches were tight. She'd sewn them with me at the kitchen table, muttering under her breath while I fixed the tension on the singer machine. Funny, isn't it? How the things we made together have lasted longer than the people we became. At 6:17 a.m., I got up, boiled water in the electric kettle I kept by the storage shelf, and poured myself a cup of instant coffee. Bitter, grainy, but hot. I sat on the wooden crate I used as a nightstand, phone in hand, thumb hovering over a name I hadn't called in years. Avery Grant, Harold's former protege. A tax attorney with a steel-trap mind and a moral compass to match. He'd spoken at Harold's funeral, eyes shining as he recounted the way my husband had taken a chance on a nervous first-year associate and taught me more about integrity in business than all of Yale law. Last I heard, Avery had started his own boutique firm in Boston, quiet, expensive, discreet. The kind of place you only call when your world's about to shift. I pressed the call icon. Grant and Foster. Came a clipped voice on the other end. How may I direct your call? This is Margaret Ellis. I need to speak with Avery. There was a beat of silence. Then one moment, Mrs. Ellis. Seconds later, I heard a familiar voice. Margaret. Avery's tone was equal parts surprise and warmth. Is everything okay? No, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But I'm about to fix that. Avery met me 3 hours later at a cafe 30 miles from Claire and Brandon's home. I borrowed Martha's car for the drive. Martha, my oldest friend and lifelong truth-teller, had stopped by the house earlier that week to bring scones, and left with an entire mental dossier of how poorly I was being treated. This doesn't sit right with me, she'd said. You're not a burden, Margaret. You're a blueprint. They're building their lives on top of you, like your bones are concrete. She was right. And today was the first day I intended to take my foundation back. Avery looked good. Gray in the beard now, but the same sharp eyes and careful speech. He stood when I entered, pulling out my chair like a gentleman. Always had manners, that one. I ordered your usual, he said with a ghost of a smile. Still a black coffee, woman? Only when I'm plotting, I replied, settling in across from him. He nodded. You said it was urgent. I didn't waste time. I pulled the documents from my bag, copies of the trust Harold and I had set up, the asset list, the dormant investment accounts, the property deeds. All still under my name. All still intact. Brandon had assumed. Claire had hoped. But no one had asked. These are the Ellis assets, I said. The house, the stocks, the long-term investments Harold and I made. There's a cabin in New Hampshire, too. Off-grid. Bought through a shell corp for privacy. Avery scanned the files quickly, then leaned back. It's all here. You haven't transferred a thing. No, I said, because I had a feeling something like this would happen. He looked at me, eyes narrowing. What exactly has happened? I hesitated. Shame has a way of stealing your voice, even when you've done nothing wrong. They put me in the basement, I said finally. My own daughter. My granddaughter sleeps in Egyptian cotton. I sleep next to a dehumidifier. Avery's face darkened. That's elder abuse. Not the kind you can report easily, I said. Not when it's subtle. Not when she still says, I love you, while handing you a space heater. He nodded, understanding more than I could say out loud. What do you want to do? He asked gently. I slid a second envelope across the table. This one thicker. Older. Containing a letter Harold wrote a month before he passed. I want to activate the contingency plan. Avery opened the envelope and read. His brows lifted slightly. You really kept it all? I did. Even the shares in Easton Tech. Especially the shares in Easton Tech. Brandon never even asked about them. All he cared about was the house. Avery looked impressed. These accounts are worth quite a bit now, especially with the market rebound. I nodded, which makes what comes next easier. He leaned forward. What is next, Margaret? I didn't flinch. I want you to establish a separate trust, one that excludes Claire and Brandon. I want a will drafted that leaves the primary estate to Ava and a portion to a foundation I'm starting. Something for women like me. Women who get shoved into basements while their legacy gets sipped with red wine upstairs. And the house. I want it evaluated. If Claire's willing to treat it as what it is, a gift with conditions, she can stay. But if she or Brandon try to leverage it against me again, I want it back. Legally. Avery gave a low whistle. You're not playing around. No, I said. I stopped playing when they moved the holiday decorations into my bedroom. That night, Claire came into the basement with a forced smile. You weren't here this morning, she said, folding her arms. I made you eggs. Brandon thought maybe you'd gone to the library. No, I said simply. I had a meeting. Her eyes flickered. With who? An old friend, I said, not offering more. She tilted her head. Mom, are you okay? I looked at her, really looked. She was thinner than she used to be. Her blouse was designer, but her shoulders were hunched. Her eyes held fear, but not of me. I'm fine, I said. But you're not. She flinched. I need to go, she said quickly. I have a Zoom in 15. Brandon's pitching a startup fund. As she turned, I stopped her. Claire, I said softly. You're allowed to be more than someone's smiling wife. She didn't respond. But later that night, I heard her crying through the floorboards. She still thinks I'm powerless. Still believes this basement is permanent. But tomorrow, the first wire transfer clears. And Margaret Ellis, the woman who once ran a team of 20 accountants, negotiated federal audits, and held her husband's hand as he took his last breath, is about to return to the surface. The first wire transfer cleared at exactly 10:01 a.m. Tuesday morning. I watched the notification pop up on the cheap flip phone Avery gave me. Not my usual phone, of course. This one was strictly for the new trust and for legal communications. Quiet. Secure. Invisible to Brandon, whose idea of privacy was checking your screen time during dinner. The amount wasn't staggering. Not yet, but it was enough to secure what I needed. An apartment, a lawyer on retainer, and most importantly, a line of credit that had nothing to do with the Ellis household. It was also enough to test something. At 11:14 a.m., I asked Claire, who was standing at the kitchen counter with her iPad, her perfectly steamed milk, and her forehead creased in stress, do you think we could stop by the bank later today? I need to transfer some funds. Her eyes barely lifted. What funds, Mom? I smiled. Some savings I forgot I had. She blinked, lips parting slightly. You didn't mention you had other accounts. No one asked. The pause that followed told me everything. Claire may have married a man who believed in dominance, but she had inherited my instinct for control. And now she was realizing that she didn't know the full game board. Is this about the basement again? She asked, tone tight. No, I said softly. It's about making sure I'm never someone's storage box. She flinched. I'm going to lie down, I added, leaving my coffee untouched. Behind me, I heard her whisper, Brandon, can we talk? That night, Brandon took me aside. Always smiling. Always speaking in the tone of a man trying to explain why your rejection letter was actually a good thing. Margaret, we're all just trying to adjust, you know? It's a new phase. Claire's stretched thin. The baby's been teething. I've got 3 rounds of funding to secure this quarter. It's not personal. The smugness radiated off him like cologne. Expensive. Unwelcome. No, I agreed. It's not personal. It's deeply strategic. He blinked. Sorry. I leaned closer. Tell me something, Brandon. Have you ever checked the title on this house? He pulled back, startled. Claire told me it was in her name. She said you. I said I was transferring it. Never finished. The paperwork's in a file drawer. Unfiled. Unexecuted. You've been entertaining in a house that's still legally mine. His lips parted. That can't be right. Oh, but it is. I let the silence hang. Then I stood. I'll be moving out by the end of the week. Thought I'd give you a heads up. You're what? Where would you go? Someplace with a view, I said. And no mildew. I walked back to the basement, leaving him standing there in the glow of his own shock. That night, Claire came down with a bottle of wine and an old photo album. Her peace offering. Do you remember this trip? She asked, pointing to a picture of us in Yosemite. Her hair braided, my arms sunburnt, Harold's smile blinding beneath a wide-brim hat. Of course I do, I said, taking the album. That was the year you cried because we didn't let you buy that overpriced geode. She laughed a little too hard. God, I was awful. No. You were passionate. She stared at the picture. You were always so strong, Mom. I don't know when you stopped being that person. That stung. More than I wanted to admit. I didn't stop, I said. You just stopped looking. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper. Are you really moving out? I closed the album. Yes. Because of Brandon? Because of me. She looked up. I forgot who I was, I told her. And I let you forget, too. But I remember now. And it's not your job to like that version of me. It's your job to respect her. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought I was protecting you. After Dad died, you just seemed so lost. I was grieving, I said. Not broken. Claire reached for my hand. Where will you go? Avery's found a place. Downtown condo. 1 floor, easy access. Secure. Warm. I'll be safe there. And I'll be free. She didn't fight me. That hurt more than if she had. Will I still see Ava? I asked softly. Claire's face crumpled. Of course you will. Mom. I never meant to erase you. No, I said, squeezing her hand. But you stopped inviting me. The next day, movers arrived. Brandon didn't help. He stood at the top of the stairs with his phone, pretending to scroll through emails. He didn't say goodbye. But as we pulled away, I noticed him staring at the for sale sign on the neighbor's lawn. His eyes flickered to the property line, just past the roses Harold had planted. I could almost hear the wheels turning. What he didn't know was that Avery had already filed the paperwork. The trust Harold and I created was now active. The house, tied to a clause that gave Claire limited tenant rights, but no authority to sell, refinance, or use it as equity without my signature. And I wouldn't be signing anything for Brandon. The condo Avery found was modest but lovely. Big windows. Hardwood floors. The kind of place with enough space for a bookcase and a little piano. Ava would love it. I stood in the kitchen that evening, unpacking dishes, when my flip phone buzzed. Avery, they're poking around your accounts. Just got a notification from Easton Tech's legal team. Brandon tried to access restricted records. Want me to press charges? I stared at the message, then typed slowly. No. Let him sweat. Because this time, the game wasn't mine to lose. And I hadn't even made my next move yet. 3 days had passed since I moved into the condo, and already, I was breathing easier. Literally. No more damp concrete. No more extension cords. No more whispering footsteps over my head like I was an uninvited ghost. The sunlight in this place hit just right around 9 a.m., pouring through the living room like an apology. I'd placed Harold's old reading chair by the window. Ava's framed drawing sat on the side table, next to my favorite lamp. These little things made it feel like home. Or, at least, like something new that could become home. But peace never lasts long when you've been underestimated. The door buzzer startled me. No one visited without calling first. I padded over to the screen. The security system Avery installed was state-of-the-art: motion-activated cameras, facial recognition, encrypted cloud backups. A luxury, yes, but necessary now. It was Claire. Alone. I buzzed her in. She entered tentatively, arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for impact. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. I gestured toward the sofa. "You're always welcome here. You know that." She sat, shoulders slumped, eyes puffy. It took her a moment to speak. "Brandon's furious." "Because I moved out?" I asked. "No," she said, voice cracking. "Because of what I signed." My stomach turned cold. "What did you sign?" She pulled out a sheet of paper. "This." He said it was just a temporary adjustment for the mortgage. Said with your name still technically on the house, it would make things smoother for the bank. I didn't understand all of it, and I didn't ask. I took the document with trembling hands. It was a power of attorney form, narrowly tailored to one clause, but wide enough in its language to grant Brandon access to my interest in the property. He'd gotten to her, manipulated her into signing control over to him, knowing she was desperate to smooth things over, desperate to keep the peace. I read every line twice. The ink was fresh. The notary was fake. The signature had been rushed. But the damage could be real. "He used you," I said carefully. "I know," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I was so stupid." "No, you were scared," I corrected. "That's what he does. Makes you feel like you're drowning and hands you a rope. Never tells you he's the one who poked the holes in the boat." Claire buried her face in her hands. "He keeps saying we're a team, that he's protecting us. But now he's threatening to refinance the house again. He says he needs liquidity. That it's urgent." Liquidity. That word had become Brandon's mantra lately. It was code for he's losing control over the narrative, over the firm, over Claire. And now he was grasping for assets. Like mine. I stood, paced, trying to temper the rage building behind my ribs. "He's been lying to you for years, Claire," I said. "Not just about money. About who he is." She looked up. "What do I do?" I paused, then handed her my phone. "Call Avery. Tell him everything. It's time we go on record. And while you're at it." I walked to the file cabinet and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside, records Harold had kept, meticulously, quietly, about a pattern of financial inconsistencies tied to Brandon's old firm. Harold hadn't trusted Brandon from the beginning. Neither had I. "This may be the first step in protecting you," I said. "Because if Brandon tries to use that form against me, he'll walk himself into a legal buzzsaw." Claire hesitated. "Will it ruin him?" I paused, staring out the window. "That depends on how much he still has left to ruin." By nightfall, Avery had filed an injunction, halting any attempt by Brandon to use the fraudulent power of attorney. The notary signature had already been flagged, an online-only service Brandon had likely faked. Claire's statement supported the fraud claim. The house was once again legally frozen. But something else happened that night. Avery called at 9:46 p.m. His voice was clipped, unusually tense. "I need you to listen very carefully, Margaret," he said. "I'm listening. There's a wire transfer. A large one. Attempted from one of the Ellis family trusts. The legacy one Harold created. Before you were married. Brandon must have found one of the old account numbers Claire left in her desk drawer. He's trying to move $200,000 into an offshore holding." My breath caught. "Can you stop it?" "We already did," Avery said. "I anticipated he'd go fishing. But Margaret, he's escalating. And he's not doing it alone." There was silence. Then he added, "We traced the attempted login. The device is registered to your former office assistant, Greta Langston." Greta? My heart sank. Greta had worked with me for years. Loyal. Soft-spoken. A second pair of hands when Harold and I built the company from scratch. She knew the vault codes. She had once held Ava as a baby. And now, she was helping Brandon? I can't believe it, I said. She's involved, Avery confirmed. And there's more. He forwarded me an audio file. A recording. Claire had installed voice monitoring software in the house's baby monitor, at my suggestion, after noticing Brandon's sudden paranoia about documents and packages. She never expected to catch a full conversation between Brandon and Greta. She's bluffing, Brandon said on the recording. She's old. Sentimental. She won't push this to court. But if she does, then what? Greta's voice asked. Then we lean on Claire. Use Ava if we have to. No judge will side with a retired widow who gave away her house and change her will. I sat very still as the file ended. Avery's voice returned. Do you want to press charges? I didn't answer right away. I was too busy remembering the way Greta used to bring me tea. And the way Brandon once asked for my advice on setting up Ava's college fund. So casually. So respectfully. Everything had been a performance. Everything. No, I said finally. Not yet. What do you want to do? I stared at the old family photo on my bookshelf, me, Harold, Claire as a baby. We looked like a normal family. We had been. Before ambition hollowed out the center. I want to make him watch it all fall apart, I said. Slowly. Silently. I want him to know it's coming. And then I'll press charges. I never liked attention. Even when Harold and I were awarded the Municipal Builders Award for our downtown revitalization work, I was content to stand a step behind, smiling politely while he gave the speech. I didn't need a spotlight. I had always believed in the quiet power of foundations, of beams and bolts and unshakable blueprints. But Brandon didn't fear quiet women. So I decided to stop being one. The opportunity came on a Wednesday. Avery called early, voice brisk. The Rotary Club still hosts the Harold Ellis Memorial Luncheon, right? Yes, I said, sipping my tea. Next week. And they invited you to speak this year? They ask every year. I always decline. Don't decline. I set the cup down. He continued. I pulled some strings. There will be representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission there. Informal. They're looking into patterns with Brandon's associates, and this might be a way to open the door, subtly. I narrowed my eyes. You want me to deliver a eulogy with teeth? I want you to tell the truth, he said. Let the people in that room feel it. Sometimes public shame is more effective than a subpoena. I said nothing for a moment. Then, tell them I accept. The day of the luncheon, I wore navy. Harold's favorite color. The brooch he gave me on our 25th anniversary, silver, understated, strong. I arrived 5 minutes early and was greeted with smiles, hugs, and watery eyes from former colleagues, city leaders, even old suppliers who still remembered when we ran Ellis Construction from our garage. Mrs. Ellis, I can't tell you how much we miss Harold, one woman said, dabbing her eyes. I miss him, too, I replied, steady. Every day. The stage was small. Nothing dramatic, just a mic, a wooden lectern, and a room of folding chairs. Claire sat in the second row, flanked by 2 of her friends. Brandon hadn't shown up. Of course he hadn't. He wasn't the kind of man who showed up unless it benefited him. But Claire did, and that mattered. When they introduced me, the room applauded warmly. I stepped up slowly, took a breath, and began. Harold Ellis believed in building things that lasted. I paused, letting the words settle. He used to say, a good foundation doesn't just hold weight. It keeps everything honest. He wasn't just talking about homes. He was talking about families, about business, about integrity. Nods around the room. A few people murmured, Amen. We built a life together, I continued, not because we were lucky, but because we were deliberate. Because we respected every beam, every bolt, every corner. And when Harold passed, I thought the work was done. I let that line hang. But it wasn't, because what we build doesn't end when we die. It lives on in how others treat what we leave behind. The room grew still. I reached into my purse, withdrew an envelope, and held it up. This is the original deed to our family home. You may have heard that I passed it on to my daughter and her husband. What you didn't know is that behind closed doors, I was pushed out of that home, moved into the basement, told to stay quiet, told I was inconvenient. A rustle of shocked whispers. I locked eyes with Claire. She didn't look away. I say this not for pity, I added, but for clarity. Because if it can happen to someone like me, a business owner, a mother, a woman who helped build half the downtown corridor, then it can happen to anyone. A few people leaned forward in their chairs. We don't talk about this kind of thing. Not in polite company. We don't talk about the way some people treat their elders once the papers are signed and the insurance policies are settled. But we should, because silence is permission. I paused, then said clearly, and I'm done giving permission. A hush fell, the kind of hush that's not quiet, but vibrating. I softened my voice. To those of you who are caregivers, thank you. To those of you who are aging, I see you. And to those of you who think wealth or charm excuses abuse, I have one message. I looked straight at Claire. I have the receipts. The audience gasped. A few people even chuckled, awkwardly at first, then louder. I held up a second envelope. Financial statements. Forged signatures. Wire transfer attempts. All submitted to the proper authorities. The man who tried to reduce me to a basement is about to find out what it's like to live underground himself. Claire's hands flew to her mouth. I nodded once, then stepped back from the microphone. The applause began as a smattering, then roared to life. But I didn't hear any of it, because all I could hear was my heartbeat and the quiet exhale of Harold's voice in my head. You've still got it, Margaret. After the luncheon, Claire followed me outside. Her face was red, but her voice was steady. Did you have to do that in front of everyone? Yes, I said calmly. I did. I know he's been awful, but public humiliation? He didn't flinch when he used your name to file fraudulent paperwork, Claire, I said. Why should I flinch when I speak the truth? She stared at me. Then, slowly, she reached into her purse and handed me a folder. What's this? The finalized divorce papers, she said. I filed them this morning. My throat tightened. And there's one more thing, she added. I signed the house back over. It's yours again. Completely. No conditions. No strings. I opened the folder. It was real. Not a photocopy. Not a draft. Claire looked me in the eye. I'm sorry, she whispered. I forgot how strong you were. But worse, I forgot how strong I used to be. I pulled her into an embrace. Tight. Fierce. Forgiving. For a long time we didn't speak. But when we pulled apart, we were no longer mother and daughter standing on opposite sides of a broken promise. We were two women. Both survivors. Both ready to rebuild. Moving back into my house should have felt like a triumph. Instead, it felt like walking into a museum of grief. Each room paused in time, caught between what Harold and I built and what Brandon tried to erase. The walls were painted over in sterile grays. The bookshelves had been replaced with floating minimalist slabs, and the family room now housed a sleek desk Claire once called Brandon's thinking station, though I'd never seen him do anything in it except check fantasy football and Google himself. But beneath the renovations, the bones were still mine. My hands brushed over the staircase railing Harold had carved himself. I pressed my palm against the kitchen island we installed during that chaotic Thanksgiving when Claire was 9. Every edge of this house held our story. Not Brandon's. Not even Claire's. Mine. The movers came at noon. By 5, I had my bedroom back. Not the guest room. Not the basement. My bedroom. The one where Harold and I had danced barefoot after closing the first big municipal contract. Where we had whispered about our retirement plans and watched Ava's baby monitor flicker like fireflies on summer nights. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Until 6:02 a.m. When the doorbell rang, I blinked, disoriented. Pulled on a robe. Padding down the hallway, I opened the door, and there he was. Brandon. Dressed in golf attire. Casual. Expensive. Like he'd just come from brunch with the devil and had a tea time with karma. He didn't ask to come in. Just stood there, jaw tight. You had no right, he said. I had every right, I replied, voice calm. And the paperwork to prove it. This isn't over. I folded my arms. No, Brandon. It is. Claire's filed. The accounts are frozen. And you are out of cards. He stepped closer. Do you know what you've done to my reputation? The board's voting next week. There's chatter about removing me as managing partner. And the SEC is doing their job. I cut in. Which is more than I can say for you. He looked around, eyes narrowing at the porch columns, the security cameras, the new keypad lock. Then he smiled. Cold. Thin. You really think you've won? No, I said. I know I have. He didn't respond, just turned and walked away. But something in the set of his shoulders made me uneasy. Not defeated. Calculating. That man wasn't done. He was regrouping. Later that afternoon, Claire stopped by with Ava. I hadn't seen my granddaughter in weeks. She ran down the entryway like she'd never been gone, her tiny arms wrapping around my waist, her voice chirping with stories about school and a new jellyfish project and how her substitute teacher had a spooky laugh like a robot witch. Claire looked exhausted, but her eyes were brighter than they'd been in months. I told Ava she could stay overnight, she said gently. If that's okay. It was more than okay. Ava and I spent the evening making grilled cheese, watching the original Willy Wonka, and pretending not to notice that neither of us ate the crusts. At bedtime, I tucked her into the same room Claire used to sleep in, walls now painted a pale blue, the little desk still tucked into the corner beneath the window. She yawned. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. Mommy cried last week. I think it was my fault. My heart clenched. No, it wasn't. Why would you think that? She stared at the ceiling. Because she said she had to protect me. But then she said she didn't know how. I knelt beside her bed. Your mommy's doing something very brave. And sometimes brave people cry, too. She thought about that. Then whispered, Can you teach me how to be brave? I kissed her forehead. You already are. The next morning, I found a folded piece of paper under my teacup on the kitchen table. Ava's handwriting, in bright pink crayon. Dear Grandma, you make the house feel warm again. I want to live with you when I grow up. Love, Ava. I sat there for a long time, staring at the note. Then I reached for my phone. Avery picked up on the first ring. Margaret. I want to make it official, I said. The house stays in trust. Ava gets it one day. Claire gets lifetime occupancy if she wants it. But Brandon? He's cut out of everything. Permanently. I already anticipated this, Avery said. The documents are ready. We can file Monday. And another thing I added. Yes. Let's review Claire's custody filings. If Brandon tries anything at all, I want Ava protected. There was a pause. Then Avery said something I wasn't expecting. You might want to sit down, Margaret. My stomach dropped. What is it? We've just been served notice, he said. Brandon's filing for temporary emergency custody of Ava. He claims Claire is mentally unfit, under the influence of an elderly parent with a grudge, and that Ava's environment is unstable. My hand went cold. This is war now, I whispered. No, Avery corrected. This is desperation. And we're going to beat him. But how? He was quiet for a moment. Then, with the truth, the paper trail. And, if you're willing, your testimony. I looked down at Ava's pink crayon note again. She wanted to live with me someday. Now I had to make sure she'd be free to choose that, without fear, without manipulation, and without a father who used her as a pawn. Tell me when to be there, I said. I'll take the stand. The courtroom smelled like lemon disinfectant and hollow promises. Claire sat beside her attorney at the petitioner's table, her face pale but composed. She wore no makeup today, just the faintest smear of color on her lips and a thin chain around her neck, Ava's initial in gold. Across from us, Brandon adjusted his cufflinks, feigning indifference. His tie was sapphire. His hair, perfect. His posture, too practiced. But I saw the twitch in his jaw. He was nervous. This wasn't his arena. He couldn't schmooze his way through sworn testimony. Couldn't manipulate a judge the way he did clients and colleagues. This wasn't brunch at the country club. This was war under fluorescent lights. Ava wasn't present. Thank God. Too young to understand that her father had just filed for full emergency custody, claiming Claire was mentally unstable, influenced by a bitter, erratic elder relative, and unfit to raise a child in a hostile environment. He tried to paint me as some unstable matriarch with a vendetta, and Claire as a crumbling woman unraveling at the seams. It was insulting, but predictable. Avery leaned toward me. "You're up second," he said. "Let him talk. Let him dig the hole." And dig he did. Brandon took the stand and spoke with the rhythm of a politician. His voice calm, almost soothing, as he painted himself as the concerned parent. Said Claire had become distant, confused, and prone to erratic decisions. That she left the house suddenly, associated with shady characters, and placed Ava in unstable environments. He called my home a retirement compound with surveillance-grade security that makes the child anxious. I nearly laughed out loud. Then he dropped it. She even allowed our daughter to sleep over with her mother, a woman recently involved in a public tirade at a civic luncheon, accusing family members of theft and corruption. There it was. The character assassination. Claire stared down at her lap. Her hands were trembling. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to our side. "Ms. Ellis, you may proceed with your witness." I stood. The courtroom murmured as I approached the stand. The judge raised an eyebrow when I was sworn in. I imagine they expected someone more frail, someone hunched and doddering. Not a woman in her late 60s, sharp-eyed, hair pinned back like a general preparing for a campaign. Avery rose. "Ms. Ellis," he began. "Let's start simply. Do you consider your daughter an unfit mother?" "No," I said. "I consider her a survivor. And the fact that she's here today, in this courtroom, fighting, tells me she's the best kind of mother." He nodded. "You've witnessed Brandon's behavior over the past year?" "I've witnessed it for nearly 5. The courtroom stiffened. I turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, I may be a grandmother, but I'm not confused. Brandon Reynolds is not here because he's concerned for Ava's well-being. He's here because his image is unraveling, and he's grabbing for whatever leverage he has left. Ava is not a child to him. She's a pawn." Brandon leaned forward. "Objection." The judge held up a hand. "Overruled. Continue, Ms. Ellis." I drew a breath. In the past 6 months, I was evicted from my own home. Brandon used forged documents to attempt access to dormant family trusts. He orchestrated fraudulent legal filings using Claire's signature. And when that didn't work, he weaponized custody. Avery stepped in again. "Have you provided evidence of this to the court?" "Yes," I said. "Financial records, voice recordings, digital logs, and statements from former employees of his firm who have witnessed Brandon manipulating client assets." "Do you fear for your granddaughter's well-being in Brandon's care?" "Yes. Because I know what it's like to live with someone who thinks affection is currency and people are assets to be acquired." Silence. Then the judge asked, "Do you have anything else to add, Ms. Ellis?" I hesitated, then reached into my handbag and pulled out a folded sheet of pink paper. I was going to keep this private, but maybe it says it better than I can. I unfolded it and read aloud. "Dear Grandma, you make the house feel warm again. I want to live with you when I grow up. Love, Ava." Brandon shifted uncomfortably. The judge looked over his glasses. "Thank you, Ms. Ellis. You may step down." I returned to the table, my heart hammering, but there was calm beneath the noise. And then the door opened. The clerk stepped in, whispered to the bailiff. A minute later, the judge cleared his throat. "There's been a late request to address the court," he said. "A witness not on the initial roster. Ms. Greta Langston." Brandon stiffened. Greta, the former office assistant. The one who had once brought me tea and was later implicated in the attempted wire transfer. She walked slowly to the front of the room. Still tidy, still quiet. But her eyes no longer held the same submissive shine. "Your Honor," she said, "I've submitted a statement to opposing counsel, but I'd like to read a portion aloud." "Go ahead." She cleared her throat. Her voice was soft, but it carried. I worked for the Ellis family for 22 years. First for Harold and Margaret. Then, after Harold's passing, I worked part-time assisting Mr. Brandon Reynolds with legal logistics. 2 months ago, I was asked to retrieve archived bank information. When I saw what it was for, a forged wire authorization, I objected. Mr. Reynolds threatened my severance package and promised to ruin me if I said anything. She looked up, directly at Brandon. I'm saying something now. The courtroom was frozen. Greta handed her written statement to the bailiff and walked out, not waiting for dismissal. Brandon looked shell-shocked. The judge leaned forward. Counsel, I suggest you advise your client. We're now entering potential criminal proceedings. Avery stood. We rest your honor. Claire looked at me, stunned. And for the first time in months, her shoulders dropped. She knew we were winning. By the following morning, Brandon Reynolds was trending. Not because he won a custody battle, not because of a new business deal, but because Greta Langston's testimony had been leaked. Her statement appeared on 2 legal blogs and a local news site by noon. By 3 p.m., the mayor's office had issued a public response, suspending all city contracts with Brandon's firm pending investigation. The dominoes were falling, one by one. Claire and I watched the news from the living room, my living room. The room Brandon had once said felt too traditional, too full of sentimental clutter. He'd replaced Harold's walnut bookshelf with some hideous steel and glass thing that looked like a dentist's tray table. I'd already had it hauled to the curb. Now, nestled back in the corner, was Harold's original shelf, refinished by Claire and Ava over the weekend, the wood now glowing with warm cherry stain and quiet redemption. Claire leaned forward, rubbing her temples. I still can't believe Greta came forward. She knew what mattered, I said. Eventually, people do. We watched a TV anchor explain the timeline, Brandon's financial irregularities, the forged documents, and now rumors of 2 former clients stepping forward with complaints. Word was the SEC had opened an official inquiry. Do you think he'll go to prison? Claire asked quietly. I paused. Maybe. Maybe not. Men like Brandon don't always go down in a blaze. Sometimes they just vanish, slowly, into disgrace. She looked at me. And Ava? She's safe, I said. Because you protected her. Because you stood up. Claire blinked fast, then whispered. Thanks to you. I shook my head. No. I just reminded you who you were. That fire was always there. The doorbell rang. Claire wiped her eyes and stood. I'll get it. I heard the creak of the front door. A long pause. Then Claire calling, Mom? You need to see this. I walked to the door. There, on the porch, sat a large wooden crate. Heavy, weathered, hand-delivered, with a single tag hanging from twine. For Margaret Ellis. Property of Harold Ellis. Found in storage unit number 47, Northwood Depot. My breath caught. We hadn't had a unit at Northwood since 2015. Harold had cleared it out when we downsized. At least I thought he had. Claire crouched beside the crate, pried it open with a crowbar the delivery man had left. Inside were blueprints. Dozens of them. Rolled architectural plans. Hand-sketched drawings. Notes written in Harold's handwriting, each labeled carefully. Maplewood Home. Final build. 1997. Claire's Playhouse, Summer Edition. Ava's Garden Bench, Future Idea. Tears stung my eyes. And there, at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a flannel shirt that still smelled faintly of sawdust and lemon oil, was a sealed letter. Claire stepped back. It's addressed to you. I took it, hands trembling slightly. Inside was a single page. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then I didn't get to show you this box myself. It holds more than drawings. It holds everything I ever believed about family, legacy, and the kind of life I hoped we were building. I know things may not have gone how we planned, but remember, the structure can bend. What matters is the foundation. And you, my love, you are always the foundation. Don't let anyone rewrite what we built. With all my heart, Harold. I clutched the letter to my chest and sat down on the porch steps, feeling the wind stir through the roses. Claire sat beside me. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. That night, Ava came home from school with a paintbrush and a jar of green glitter paint. "I want to paint a sign for the front gate," she said. "Something happy." I smiled. "What do you want it to say?" She thought for a moment, then whispered, "This is where love lives." So we did. We painted it together, right on the old cedar board that used to hold Harold's house number. Now it held something more. A declaration. A promise. A warning, too. Brandon's name might still appear in legal documents, in headlines, in lawsuits. But not here. Not at this house. This house didn't belong to him anymore. It never had. The courthouse looked different the second time. Same marble floors. Same security checkpoint. Same tired bailiff by the elevators. But this time, I walked in not as a defendant, not even as a victim. I walked in as a witness to truth. A mother. A grandmother. A woman who had reclaimed her power. The gallery was packed. Local press. A few courthouse regulars. Even two of Brandon's former clients, men who had once called him the gold standard of estate planning, now watching him like a failed magician exposed in the final act. Claire sat beside me at the petitioner's table, her hands folded neatly. She wore a navy blazer over a simple white blouse. Not to impress. Not to intimidate. Just to be heard. Across the aisle, Brandon looked smaller somehow. Thinner. Paler. His attorney flipped through a leather binder, pretending not to notice that the judge had brought two clerks instead of one. This wasn't just a custody ruling anymore. It was a decision with legal ripple effects tied to the pending investigations. The judge cleared his throat. Case number 1283. Reynolds versus Reynolds. Petition for emergency custody of minor child, Ava Reynolds. Closing remarks will be brief. Judgment will be rendered today. Avery stood first. He spoke not like a man trying to win, but like a man with the full weight of truth behind him. He walked the judge through Claire's record. No criminal history. No history of neglect. Full cooperation with investigators. A sworn statement from Ava's teacher confirming a stable, nurturing environment. He didn't yell. Didn't pound the table. He simply said, "Claire Reynolds is a good mother." The only unstable element in Ava's life has been the man who brought us to court today. Then it was Brandon's turn. His new attorney stood. His original one had quietly recused himself 2 days earlier and delivered a meandering speech about misunderstandings, distorted narratives, and the importance of preserving paternal rights. It was tone-deaf. Hollow. Brandon didn't speak. He didn't look at us. Not until the judge turned to him directly and said, "Mr. Reynolds, do you have anything to add before I rule?" Then finally he stood. Not with confidence, but with something I almost mistook for shame. "I only wanted what was best for my daughter," he said softly. I stood too. Avery touched my sleeve gently, uncertain. "Your Honor," I said, voice clear. "May I speak?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "Briefly, Ms. Ellis." I turned toward Brandon. "You didn't want what was best for Ava," I said. "You wanted control. You wanted power. And when you couldn't take it from me, you tried to take it from your own daughter." Brandon's mouth twitched. "I was wrong," he muttered. "Yes," I replied, not moving. "But not just because you got caught." The courtroom was silent. I stepped forward, but just one pace. Enough to be seen. Enough to be heard. "You used to call Harold's house an antique. You said it was stuck in the past. But here's the thing about old homes, Brandon. They're built to last. They creak. They resist. They survive storms." I pointed to Claire. "That's my daughter. She survived your storm." Then I looked at the judge. "And now, she's ready to rebuild." The judge studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Please be seated." We all sat. Then the ruling came. In the matter of custody of the minor child, Ava Reynolds, the judge said, "This court finds no evidence of endangerment, neglect, or instability in the petitioner's home." Brandon blinked. The judge continued. "Furthermore, the court takes into account pending civil investigations, past attempts to manipulate estate holdings, and recent sworn testimony suggesting a pattern of coercive behavior. He turned to Claire. Custody remains with the petitioner. Sole legal and physical custody is hereby granted. Claire exhaled. Her whole body sagged with the weight of it. The judge raised a hand. Additionally, Mr. Reynolds is granted supervised visitation only, pending outcome of federal investigations. Brandon's mouth opened, but no words came. Not even he had prepared for this. And then the final blow. Ms. Reynolds, Ms. Ellis, the judge said, "Thank you for your candor. Your family is dismissed with the full support of this court." We stood. No cheering. No gavel slam. Just quiet. Powerful. Final. Outside, the sun was blinding. Ava was waiting with Martha and George under the old elm tree across from the parking lot. When she saw her mother, she burst into a run. "Mommy!" Claire caught her mid-sprint, pulling her into a long, teary hug. I let them have that moment, then joined them. George beamed. Martha wiped her eyes. "She's free now," I whispered to Claire. Claire looked up at me. "We both are." Back at the house, we celebrated with takeout and Ava's favorite strawberry lemonade. Claire set the court documents on the mantel, not as a trophy, but as a marker. A line drawn between what was and what comes next. That night, as I stood in the doorway of my room, the one I'd slept in with Harold, the one I'd lost, and the one I'd now reclaimed, I saw a slip of paper tucked into the mirror frame. Ava's handwriting. Purple crayon this time. "You're like a tree, Grandma. Strong and still here. Even after the storm." I stared at it for a long time. Not crying. Just feeling everything. Grief. Relief. Pride. Peace. And something new. Closure. The morning air was crisp, and the sun had that early autumn warmth that kissed your skin without burning it. The roses along the front path were blooming again. They always did this time of year, just as Harold liked it. I sat on the front porch, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, sipping coffee from the chipped blue mug Ava had painted for me last Christmas. The house was quiet. Claire had taken Ava to her art class, and Martha was coming over later to help plant new lavender along the walkway. It was the first day in months I hadn't felt the weight of dread hanging in the air. No court date looming. No headlines about Brandon. No fear. Just peace. And the sound of birds, wind, and one little girl's future unfolding in the house behind me. I glanced across the yard to where the garage used to be. In its place now stood a sunroom under construction, Claire's idea. Half glass, half timber, with sliding doors and wide planks for reading benches. Ava wanted to call it the thinking room. She said it was for when your heart needs extra space. She wasn't wrong. Inside the house, things had shifted too. Brandon's cold, minimalist decor was gone. Claire and I had repainted the kitchen a soft sage green, hung new curtains, and restored the photos that once lined the hallway. Harold's tools, rescued from storage, now lived in the basement again, arranged just how he'd liked them. But the biggest change? The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt earned. There's a kind of stillness that comes only after a storm, when you've survived it and you're still standing. Not untouched, not unscarred, but stronger in ways you never expected. Claire had grown into that strength. So had Ava. And maybe so had I. Because what I didn't expect, not even after all we'd been through, was how much joy could return once the noise was gone. The old mailbox creaked, drawing me from my thoughts. I stood, stretched, and walked down the front path. A single letter had arrived, postmarked from the federal courthouse. I opened it slowly, unsure what it might contain. Inside was a formal letter from the clerk. "Dear Ms. Ellis, this letter is to inform you that all proceedings in the matter of Reynolds versus Reynolds have officially concluded. Your role in the case is now formally closed, and the court extends its appreciation for your testimony and cooperation. Enclosed is your original witness statement, unsealed at your request. Office of the Clerk, County Family Court Division." I pulled out the folded pages. My handwriting stared back at me. Neat. Precise. Written months ago, when I had no idea how things would turn out. At the bottom, in pen, someone had written a note. You didn't just save your granddaughter. You reminded all of us what truth sounds like. Judge Helena Ortiz. I stood there on the path, letter fluttering in the breeze, and felt a strange lump rise in my throat. Not sorrow, just fullness. That afternoon, Claire and Ava returned from class with paint-streaked fingers and a box of pastries. Ava ran ahead and dropped something onto the porch table, a sketch. "Close your eyes, Grandma," she squealed. "Then open them slow." Okay. I did. When I looked, the picture took my breath away. It was our house. The porch. The roses. The new sunroom rising where the garage once stood. In crayon, Ava had drawn us two, me, Claire, and herself. 3 stick figures, all smiling, standing beside a tree. At the top, in big, careful handwriting, she had written, "This is where love lives." The same words she had painted on the old cedar board weeks ago. But now, she had signed it too. Love, Ava Reynolds Ellis. I looked up at Claire. She smiled softly. She asked if she could hyphenate her name. I told her she could be whoever she wanted to be. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, and she chose both. Claire nodded. She chose both. That night, we hung the drawing in the hallway, right between a photo of Harold and one of Ava in her Halloween astronaut costume. A little legacy nestled between 2 generations of quiet strength. And as I walked through the house, my house, our house, I felt it hum with something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. History. Home. Brandon had tried to claim this house with forged documents. But what he never understood was the blueprints were never his. The legacy was never his. The love was never his. That belonged to us. And always would. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you've ever felt underestimated, erased, or silenced, just know, you're not alone. This channel is filled with stories like this, and tomorrow, I've got one that's even more powerful. So until then, stay strong. Stay seen.